Caleb Whitmore had built his fortune on precision. Numbers obeyed him. Markets bent when he leaned into them. Entire departments shifted at the subtle lift of his eyebrow. People described him as disciplined, sharp, untouchable. He preferred efficient. Efficient men did not waste time on curiosity. But for 3 weeks, he had done exactly that. Every Thursday at exactly 6 in the evening, Daniel Reyes left the glass tower of Whitmore Holdings with the same quiet nod to the security guard and the same worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. Daniel was an analyst, competent, punctual, almost invisible. He never lingered in the executive hallways. He never spoke unless spoken to. His reports were clean, thoughtful, understated. Caleb appreciated that. What Caleb did not appreciate was the discrepancy. 2 months earlier, a minor audit had flagged something peculiar. Daniel's access card had been used after hours on several occasions in a restricted archive room. There was no evidence of theft, no files missing, no system breach. Still, in Caleb's world, anomalies were cracks in glass. You did not ignore cracks. He had called Daniel into his office once casually and asked about overtime. "I like quiet," Daniel had said with a faint smile. "Less distraction." Caleb had studied his face, calm, earnest, unremarkable. And yet, so on the 4th Thursday, Caleb told his driver to go home early. He changed out of his tailored suit into a simple coat and followed Daniel into the fading gold of evening. The city shifted after work hours. Ties loosened. Heels came off. Street vendors filled the air with smoke and spice. Daniel walked quickly, head slightly bowed, weaving through pedestrians with the ease of someone accustomed to not being noticed. Caleb kept a careful distance, heart beating with an unfamiliar mix of irritation and anticipation. They passed the subway entrance. Daniel did not go down. Instead, he continued on foot, turning into neighborhoods Caleb rarely visited. The pavement cracked. The storefronts grew smaller. Neon signs flickered. The air smelled of fried food and damp brick. Caleb's jaw tightened. If Daniel was selling company secrets, this was exactly the kind of place to do it. Quiet, overlooked. Daniel stopped in front of a narrow building wedged between a laundromat and a pawnshop. The sign above the door was faded, letters peeling. Light glowed from inside. Caleb slowed, pretending to check his phone. Through the dusty window, he saw folding chairs arranged in uneven rows. A whiteboard stood at the front of the room, and children, a dozen of them, maybe more, different ages, different heights. Their backpacks lay scattered at their feet. Daniel stepped inside. Caleb waited, counting to 10, then 20, before approaching the window. Daniel placed his satchel on a table and removed a stack of papers. The children gathered around him instantly. "Okay," Daniel said, clapping his hands once. "Who's ready to tackle fractions today?" A small groan rippled through the room. Caleb felt something shift inside him, subtle but undeniable. He stayed there longer than he intended, watching through the glass. Daniel moved between the rows with patience Caleb had never witnessed in the office. He knelt beside a girl struggling with her worksheet, guiding her pencil gently. He laughed when a boy made a dramatic show of despair over long division. He listened, truly listened, when one of them began talking about a school bully. This was not corporate espionage. This was something else. The following week, Caleb followed again, and the week after that. Each time Daniel left work, walked the same route, and spent 3 hours in that cramped room. Sometimes he brought snacks. Sometimes he brought donated books. Once Caleb saw him hand an envelope to the woman who seemed to run the place. She shook her head at first, but Daniel insisted. Caleb's suspicion dissolved into something far more complicated. One Thursday, rain fell hard and cold. Caleb stood across the street under the shallow shelter of a closed storefront. Daniel arrived soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. The children cheered when he entered, as if a hero had returned from battle. Caleb's chest tightened unexpectedly. He thought of his own childhood, of tutors who had been paid by the hour and left promptly when time was up. He thought of the way his father used to say, "No one gives you anything for free, son. Remember that." Inside that small building, Daniel was giving everything for free. The 4th week, Caleb made a decision. He crossed the street and entered. The room fell silent. A few of the children stared openly at his polished shoes. Daniel turned, surprise flickering across his face before he masked it with composure. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. Caleb suddenly felt overdressed despite the simplicity of his coat. "I was in the area," he replied, hating how false it sounded. Daniel nodded slowly. "This is the after-school program. We help with homework. Some of the kids' parents work late." Caleb looked around more closely. The paint peeled from the corners of the ceiling. The heater rattled loudly. The tables were mismatched and scarred with old graffiti. But the room felt alive. "Why didn't you mention this?" Caleb asked quietly. Daniel hesitated. "It's not related to my job." Caleb studied him. "It is if you're using company time or resources." "I'm not," Daniel said firmly. "I come here after work, and the printing I do at the office, I pay for it." The children watched the exchange with wide eyes. Caleb felt heat rise to his face, an unfamiliar sensation. "I didn't accuse you," he muttered. Daniel's gaze softened. "I know." Caleb cleared his throat. "May I sit?" Daniel gestured to an empty chair. Caleb sat among the children, knees awkwardly angled. He listened as Daniel explained fractions in simple, careful language. He watched as comprehension lit up a boy's face like sunrise. When the session ended, the children trickled out into the rainy night, shouting goodbyes. Caleb remained seated. "How long?" he asked. 2 years, Daniel replied. "It started with just my niece and her friend. Then others joined." "And you've been funding this yourself?" Daniel shrugged. "Mostly." "Why?" Daniel's expression changed. A shadow passed through it. He leaned back against the table, folding his arms. "When I was 10, he began slowly, my father lost his job. We moved 3 times in 1 year. I fell behind in school. I almost dropped out. There was a teacher who stayed after class with me every day for months. He didn't have to. He wasn't paid extra. But he said someone had once done it for him." He paused, swallowing. "I wouldn't be working for you if he hadn't." The simplicity of it struck Caleb harder than any accusation could have. "Why keep it secret?" Caleb asked. Daniel looked at him carefully. "Because I didn't want it to become a performance." The words landed like a blow. Caleb thought of the charity galas, the oversized checks, the photographers. He thought of his own carefully curated generosity. He stood abruptly. "How much do you need?" Daniel blinked.
For what?
"To fix this place, to expand it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We're managing." "That's not what I asked." A flicker of pride sparked in Daniel's eyes. "I don't want to owe you." Caleb exhaled slowly. "You don't. Consider it an investment." "In what?" Caleb hesitated. The honest answer rose before he could stop it. "In becoming better than I am." Silence filled the room. Daniel studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "We could use new computers." The transformation was not instant. Renovations took time. Permits dragged. Contractors complained. But Caleb returned every Thursday. Sometimes he brought pizza. Sometimes he helped with math, though he was surprised to find his patience thinner than Daniel's. One evening, a small girl with braids tugged on Caleb's sleeve. "Are you Daniel's boss?" she asked. "Yes." She considered him seriously. "You should give him a raise." Daniel laughed from across the room. Caleb smiled. "I'll think about it." But the laughter faded when, 3 months later, the audit team called him in again. There had been irregular transfers. Not from Daniel's account, from Caleb's. He stared at the numbers in disbelief. Large sums had been redirected into shell companies he did not recognize. His chief financial officer sat across from him, pale. "It's sophisticated," the man said. "We're tracing it." Caleb felt a cold wave crash through him. Years of discipline, of control. And someone had been siphoning from beneath his feet. His mind moved quickly. Access logs, permissions, names. Daniel had access to data. The thought sickened him. He drove straight to the community center that evening, fury and betrayal battling inside him. Daniel looked up as Caleb entered, reading the storm. In his face immediately. "Oh, what happened?" Daniel asked. Caleb's voice came out harsher than intended. "Tell me I'm wrong." "About what?" "The money." Daniel went still. "The transfers," Caleb pressed. "You're one of the few with clearance." A hurt unlike anything Caleb had seen crossed Daniel's face. "You think I would steal from you?" he asked quietly. "I don't know what to think." The children watched, frightened. Daniel inhaled slowly. Check your CFO. Caleb blinked. Excuse me. He handles final approvals. And he's been pushing for more automation lately, hasn't he? Caleb's mind raced. The CFO had indeed advocated for streamlined oversight. You're deflecting, Caleb snapped. Daniel stepped closer. You followed me for weeks because you thought I was hiding something. I wasn't. I won't start now. The steadiness in his voice pierced Caleb's anger. That night, Caleb ordered a deeper forensic investigation. Within 48 hours, the truth surfaced. The CFO had been embezzling for over a year, manipulating systems Caleb trusted blindly. The shell companies led back to offshore accounts in his name. Caleb sat alone in his office long after midnight, staring at the skyline. The betrayal felt intimate, personal. He had trusted the wrong man and almost condemned the right one. The next Thursday, Caleb arrived early at the center. Daniel was setting up chairs. I'm sorry, Caleb said before anything else. Daniel paused, then nodded slowly. I know. Caleb's voice wavered. I let suspicion blind me. Daniel studied him. You're used to guarding what's yours. Caleb swallowed. I'm learning there are things more valuable. They stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken understanding. Months later, the center expanded into the building next door. Fresh paint brightened the walls. New computers lined sturdy desks. Enrollment doubled. At the opening celebration, there were no reporters, no photographers. Just families, laughter, and the smell of home-cooked food. Caleb stood near the back, watching Daniel help a boy solve an equation. For the first time in his life, Caleb felt wealth not as a shield, but as a tool. He approached Daniel quietly. You know, Caleb said, you never asked for recognition. Daniel smiled. I never needed it. Caleb looked around at the children, at their hopeful faces. His voice softened. You broke my heart, you know. Daniel frowned slightly. How? By showing me what I'd been missing. Daniel's expression warmed. Then maybe it wasn't broken. Maybe it just opened. Caleb felt something in his chest loosen completely. The city outside continued its relentless pace. Markets would rise and fall. Fortunes would shift. But inside that humble building, something steadier grew. And for the first time, Caleb understood that the greatest return on investment was not measured in numbers, but in lives changed quietly, without applause.